Well, hey there, you're on the internet, I have some free time, and welcome to the Triple N Network, where all you newbie nib nerds can find all the news you'll need. Let's look at an ink today, shall we? Now, today's ink is by Graf von Faber-Castell, and it is Moss Green, which I have in sample form, and I actually quite enjoyed. Now, I think I remember seeing somewhere that this is, I think it's one of their document-proof inks. Now, what that means, I actually have no idea. I think I know what archival means, which is generally that it resists UV light and is pH neutral and all that, but I don't necessarily know what document proof means. It does not inherently mean waterproof, as we shall see. Yes, so two pens I used were these. This is a Pilot Metropolitan with a Japanese fine nib, which is obscenely fine. It's like trying to write with the corner of a razor blade. I'm not always good at it. And this is a Pilot 78G with a double broad nib, but in the 78Gs, both the double and single broad nibs are actually stubs. I think this comes out to about like 1.2 or 1.3. So let's look at some comparisons. Now, I don't know if this will show up on camera, but there's actually a little bit of hazy red sheen in a few parts through here. It'd be nice if that showed up, but it doesn't feel like it. So here is Moss Green, and here is Diamine Sherwood Green, which you can see is a little lighter. And here is actually Private Reserve Ebony Green. As you can see even here, that there is just red sheen for days all through this swatch. But yeah, here actually in the lighter parts I thought looked quite like the darker parts here in Moss Green. Now here's Noodler's Green Marine, which is a little bit lighter and kind of has a different finishing texture. And here is KWZ's Green Number 3, which is maybe a little bit lighter, but I thought some of the darker parts definitely look like some of the darker parts here. So there you go, there are your comparables. Alright, so here, the one on the right with the little D in the corner is the one that I let dry, which is not how you're supposed to do it. But I feel like it's taught me some things over the years, and definitely revealed some things that we would not have seen if we did the test the way that we're supposed to. Now, what you do is you put the line of ink and then pretty much instantly drop it in the water, and you can definitely see where that initial drop was put. You have this sort of hazy gray color with little hints of blue through here, and sort of resist going up, and then we have this green, kind of like we would expect. There's little hints of blue at the top. Now here's where I let it dry, which again is not how you're supposed to do it, but dot got much darker, which we often see in these tests, but it also turned blue. And there is a lot more blue separated all along here, which sort of makes this stuff at the top more noticeably yellow-green, which I thought was rather fascinating. Let's look at some chemical resistance tests. Now, here's the water test. As you can see, it definitely got some stuff moving, but not everything. And then, rather fascinatingly, the 1/3 bleach solution didn't get rid of it. It turned parts of it blue and moved those bits around, but it could not completely get rid of it. Now, ammonia pen flush did get it moving, quite like water, but it also started to affect the paper. Same with hydrogen peroxide. But, yeah, so interesting. Now, paper test. Top down to density, Clairefontaine 90 grams per square meter. This is an intense, like, rich green. It's a bold green. It has little hints of blue in it. And hopefully this will come through. I've been having trouble getting sheen on camera today. There we go. There is definitely red sheen on here, because this is a very well saturated ink. As you can see, even here in the much lighter parts of the scrubby, you can barely make out those little lines from the quadrilateral paper. Now, that Japanese fine took 11 seconds to dry. The stub took 15, but again, that's, you know, there's the sort of sharp end, you know, of the stub is literally acting like a squeegee on the page, on the downstroke, so sometimes I feel like maybe I should do like a diagonal or something. But, yeah, so stub took 15 seconds to dry. We have very lovely shading, and kind of like we see here, we have a dark outline around the wettest parts. It is slightly wet. I'd say it's maybe about a 6 out of 10. And we even have some sheen in the writing. Unfortunately, that fine is so fine that it's going to be impossible to get on camera. But yeah, very well behaved. No bleed, no feather, no spread, no echo. All good in that regard. There's really not a lot of water resistance. But what's interesting is it dyed the page blue. Now, this had maybe a half an hour to dry before I washed it, but still, not the easiest thing in the world to recover. There was a little something, but Next up is Fabriano Eco Qua. It is an 85 gram per square meter paper. It's lovely. The more I use it, the more I enjoy it. Now, here we definitely have some very, very lovely shading, and please show up. Yes, there we go. We also have a good deal of red sheen, and it is in the writing as well. And not just in halos, but it is most noticeable in little halos and pretty much everywhere where it's dark. But yes, anyways, we have very nice shading. It is a very pleasant color of green. Japanese fine took 12 seconds to dry. The 78G double broad stub took 15. Yeah, it's quite nice. I was really enjoying it. And there's no bleed, no feather, no spread, no echo. There's also not a lot of water resistance, so whatever this document-proof thing is, if it is in fact one of those, it's not the most permanent. It did dye the page a little bit, and you can see a little bit of the writing remaining, but really not a lot. It would not be the easiest thing in the world to recover. Now next up is Rhodia, 80 grams per square meter, where we kind of have more of the same. It's we have a little bit of red sheen, not quite as much as Fabriano, but we do have lovely shading. We do have a dark outline around some of the wettest parts. The Japanese fine took 10 seconds to dry. The stub took 14. And honestly, the dry times, considering how saturated this ink is, it's actually pretty good. And especially considering it's a 6 out of 10 flow, so could be a lot worse. Now, there's no bleed, no feather, no spread, no echo. We do have a bit of a dyed page. We do have most of it gone, and in fact there are whole letters that are completely gone. So it would not be the easiest thing in the world to try and recover. Next up is Tomoe River paper, which is known for drawing out shading and sheen and dry times and echo, and it kind of did, but not obscenely, if that makes any sense. Now, here we actually have a ton of red sheen. And pretty much everywhere where it's dark, just imagine that there is red sheen galore. Because, yeah, and it's actually a very Christmassy kind of contrast, because it's this sort of like dark, like, I don't know, fir tree green, and then the sort of red little flashes. But anyways, Japanese fine took 14 seconds to dry. That double broad stub took 17. Yeah, it looks really good if you like shading. And I always have to remind myself, not everyone loves shading, but I get so excited about it, sometimes I forget. But yeah, there's no bleed, no feather, no spread. I say maybe there is some echo, because in the areas where it gets dark enough to have that sort of dark outline, enough to like sheen, it can get really, it is a fairly dark ink, and this is very thin paper. Almost obscenely thin. I think it's, what, like 52 grams per square meter? Yeah. Now, this paper loves to let ink slide away when you add water, and it kind of did, in the sense that it didn't dye the page much, because when I sopped up all that water, it sort of took all the ink with it. Now, what I do think is interesting is if you look at these dots in the fine, they're really yellow. I don't know why that is, but I thought I'd point it out. And there's very little left. Just curious. Now for the next 3 tests, I only used that Japanese fine except to write the name. This is the world's worst 20-pound copier paper. I can pretty much guarantee you have something a step up from this, if not several. In fact, I've had copier paper that just I miss it so much. I didn't know how good it was until I lost it, because this stuff is just terrible. But the results on here are actually really not too bad. We compare it to This, we can see that there is spread, but really not so much. It looks maybe more like a Western fine than a Japanese fine. We have a little bit of woolliness, but really not much. We don't have a ton of feathering, so it's fairly well behaved in that regard. 1.5 seconds to dry. Really not bad. It's still an intense green. You know, it doesn't lose the vibrancy, which can sometimes happen on more absorbent papers. Let's look at this. It absolutely did not come out the back, which, honestly, if you've even just seen some of my tests from this past week, this stuff is so awful that we've had actually several things that I've used a Japanese fine that have just come pouring out the back of this stuff. So this really started to impress upon me that maybe what we have here is really something worth looking into, because it's a wet flowing ink. It's a 6 out of 10. And yes, it's a Japanese fine, but this paper is so awful that this made me pay attention. Now, more absorbent papers tend to draw the ink in, make it harder to wash out, and that is most certainly what happened here. As you can see, what's there is very dark, and actually, it's very clear. Now, if we look at the writing, you see that stuff at the center is actually, it's like a dark slatey kind of blue, and the yellow is washing away. Just saying. That's why I do those drying tests, because I'm telling you, it reveals things. So if you had to recover that, I think you could. I mean, it's pretty clear, pretty there, pretty dark. Didn't freak out. Now, next up is Mead Notebook Paper. This stuff is very common for school children in the United States. This is the kind that comes out of a spiral notebook, not the kind you'd find in like a lab book or a composition book. And this stuff lately has been feathering like crazy. It takes any opportunity to feather, and here it was like it was feathering in, like, you know, fits and starts. Like, so look at the bottom of the U and jump, and like the branches of the E and the above. Then we look at like quick and boxing. For the most part, it's actually kind of okay. And actually, if you look at the writing compared to the 20-pound, you can see that there's almost no spread. And considering there isn't as much spread on the 20-pound as there usually is, that's really not bad. Now, we still have an intense green color, which is very nice. It took 2.5 seconds to dry. And there is absolutely no bleed. None. Doesn't come anywhere near the back of the page. Honestly, everything you can see right now is just because this is physically thinner than 20-pound paper. And this is a pretty, you know, dark medium green. Honestly, I am super picky. I have pretty much, in this point of my life, given up writing on both sides of the page. This, I would actually feel pretty comfortable doing that. And again, this is very cheap paper. I mean, very cheap. You can get like a ream of this stuff for, I think, like $5. Yeah, so if you're still in school and you have to use this kind of paper, honestly, think about it. I mean, this really not bad. And if you've seen some of my other tests, this paper can absolutely freak out. Like, sometimes it's been so bad it's almost amusing, the water test on this paper. But if you'll see, yes, it dyed the page. But again, what's at the center? It's very clear, very dark. For the most part, it didn't freak out. For some reason, just the bottom of that R. But I almost feel like if I added more water, it would have become more legible. Yeah, it's pretty clear, pretty there. Recoverability is high. Now, lastly is Moleskine Notebook Paper, which I hate because it's terrible. However, this surprised me. There is no bleed. There is none. Which honestly, if you've seen any of my tests for like the last year, this is almost unheard of. This like literally like kind of stopped me cold. I was like, what is happening here? I mean, I literally have like 40 Moleskine notebooks. I'm not exaggerating. I should post a picture right now. Yeah, I can't get rid of them because I bought them before I knew better, and now I hate them so much that I couldn't give them to anyone that I like. And the thing is, I don't have people in my life I don't like, because who would do that? So I'm stuck with these 40 Moleskine notebooks I can't get rid of. However, I don't know. Maybe I should get like a big old bottle of moss green and buy some more fine nibs, even though I hate fine nibs, and just go to town. I don't know. But if you're like me and you're stuck with Moleskine and you're like, damn it, I'm going to use them, which I have not made that decision yet, but if you have, look into it, because holy moly. Look at that. I can't remember the last time this happened. I literally can't remember the specific last time this happened. Because when has this happened? Like, never, essentially. So, however, there is the downside. It still looks kind of ugly. It could look a lot worse. In fact, if you look, we do have some feathering and some woolliness, but it's not the big, ugly, scary, spiky, like thorn feathers. It's mostly sort of like a woolly texture on steroids kind of feathering. So honestly, if you can put up with that, and look at this. So this was that, 1.3 or whatever double broad stub. Yeah, in the areas where we would get shading, there's extra woolliness and feathering, but even there, we don't get bleed. We have the barest little bit of show through in those areas where it got laid on really thick, like the R, the bottom of the O. But that's it. So maybe that's what I should do. Maybe I should just but yeah. So this comes in a 75 milliliter bottle, which is fairly large. I mean, Diamine is an 80 milliliter bottle. However, an 80 milliliter bottle of Diamine, I think, goes for, like $16? The 75 milliliter bottle of most Graf von Faber-Castell inks costs $30. Now, bear in mind, a bottle of standard Noodlers is 90 milliliters and generally costs about $12.50. But think about it. I mean, to everyone, cost to value ratios are different, but now there is this. Despite the fact that Mead and even the world's worst 20-pound copier paper actually did kind of okay, here we don't do so okay. It really dyed the page, it sort of feathered and exploded. It did weird things. So maybe even if you are going to use it, don't get it wet. Anyways, so there you go. For your consideration, from the Triple N Network, Graf von Faber-Castell's Moss Green is a wonderful shade of green. It's as well saturated. You've got the red sheen on the premium papers. It did surprisingly well across the board on the cheap papers. It wasn't perfect, but on every single one of the cheap papers that I tested, we had a little something. So if you're in a situation where you need to use really crappy papers, definitely look into it if it's in your price range. But yeah, this ink genuinely surprised me at every turn. And it's a pleasant color. It's fairly, yeah, I'd call it well behaved. It's not the most water resistant, except in really absorbent papers. Yeah, so, I mean, honestly, this ink genuinely surprised me. Like, on every page there was something, each different type of paper, there was something that caught my attention. So, yeah, I don't know. Think about it. So, for your consideration from the Triple N Network, if you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more, please subscribe to the channel. And thanks for watching. Bye.